You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series and syndicating for the A-List Online. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and what follows is a conversation between myself and a fellow by the name of Sam Matthews, who's the bassist in a Sydney band called the Knowgoods. The reason for the conversation is to promote the Knowgoods' brand new self-titled LP. So let's have a listen to what Sam has to say. Here we go. Mackay-Smith calling for our chat. How are you going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Mate, I'm plugging away. We finally got some typical hot weather from where I'm from, so just dealing with that at the moment. But I can't complain, mate. It's been, if it goes below about, I don't know, what do I reckon, 18 degrees or so, it's getting the shits, to be honest with you, because it usually means the jacker's got to be brought out, which is a little bit too much thinking for me with my busy lifestyle, mate, to be frank. But how's things been going for you otherwise?
Yeah, not too bad. We've been keeping busy. Actually, the weather's just taken a turn up here as well. Been pretty nice the last couple of days, and then just turned rubbish today.
Yeah, are you in Perth or in Sydney?
In Sydney.
Sydney, okay, gotcha. Yep, no worries. Yeah. Look, it's I guess we're only 1,000 kilometres away from each other, but it's remarkable how different the weather can be, can't it?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. Mate, this album, good stuff. So this is a self-titled affair, I think, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken, or has it got a title?
That's right.
Okay.
No, it is self-titled.
So I'll kick things off because I'll tell you what I'm hearing, okay? And I know you probably get this feedback a bit, so bear with me through the cliche for a moment, because I did hear some other things too, but there's heavy lashings of Rolling Stones in there, which is a wonderful thing. Can never have too much of that. But there's also 50s doo-wop, Elvis Costello, and one of my favourites, the Vinyls. What are your thoughts?
Oh, love it. Yeah, no, that's great. It sort of had that kind of vibe for us. I mean, we had, like, our love of, like, the Angels and that kind of classic Australian rock as well, and then, like, trying to bring in something a bit more modern too, but no, I like those comparisons.
It's an album, it's cohesive, okay? All of the tracks that I certainly listen to, so I listen to music in the car, so I couldn't name check things. Of course, I've got iTunes up in front of me right now, so I can see that there's 12 tracks on there, so there's quite a lot. You've worked your asses off, obviously, to get it up to that point. And it's cohesive because the quality of the songs are consistent. So whilst I can't name-check any of the songs that I felt were a highlight, because it all seems to blend into one, as you can appreciate when you're listening to it in the car, what I am very much aware of is when there hasn't been much thought put into an album's narrative, it's a bit like the peaks are too high and the valleys are too deep, but not with yours. It's very consistent. So was that something that you had in mind when you were producing an album?
Yeah, absolutely. So these songs came together. They were a collection of songs that we had that we sort of decided these can't go on a couple of singles or an EP or two EPs. They kind of they needed to stay together. So it was actually considered when we put it together.
Okay. 12 songs, though. That's a lot. So the creative juices were flowing. Are you the primary songwriter in the band, or is it more of a collective?
So we've got two main songwriters, Ben and Tyler. So they're the voices that you hear on the record.
Okay.
And they have been bringing their tracks to our band for the last few years, and that's we've built up this sort of collection over the last couple of years and had a bunch more, and just weeded them out to this 12 and thought this is the collection that it is.
Okay, gotcha. And I'm just reading your biography here on Facebook. Are you from the inner west of Sydney? Is that right?
We all are now in the inner west in Sydney. We all grew up on the outer rim of Sydney and have since, as we've grown up, moved into where the scene is.
What's it like down there these days? I used to be in a band called Velveteen in Sydney many moons ago, about 15 years ago or so, and it was tough, to be quite frank, back then. But I don't get the opportunity to talk to too many Sydney bands, but ironically I've got yourself and I've got Slow Culture to talk to after you, a fella from a band called Slow Culture, who's on Firestarter as well, you probably know, after you, and you're both from Sydney. Now that I know that you're from Sydney, it's really unusual for me to talk to a band from Sydney, and I must have spoken to at least 50 or 60 Australian artists at the moment, but do you find the scene is healthy at the moment down there?
It's healthy in pockets. So there's definitely, like, obviously with all the things going on in the city with our nightlife at the moment, it's tough. Definitely in the inner city, but we found that the outer suburbs are still kicking and definitely still have a scene. You just sort of you have to know where to look for it. Like, we've played down in Melbourne and we've gotten some really good vibes from there and can see it as like a thriving culture. I think up here it's more of a case of knowing where to look for it.
Yes, Sydney's very much like that. It's certainly a city. Brisbane here, for example, we've only got north side and south side. There's a few other things like Bayside as well, but Sydney, I couldn't even keep up with the amount of pockets where people identify that they come from. There's the Shire, there's the northern districts, there's the inner west, there's the eastern suburbs, there's the leafy North Shore, the mean streets of the leafy North Shore there. There's the inner city. There's all these different spaces and therefore there's going to be different scenes that effectively cater to people who who go to these places, isn't there? So have you found that the desire to potentially leave Sydney, has that something that's come out of somebody's lips in the band yet, or are you one of those bands where it's like, look, we're going to stay here and we're going to do what we need to do here?
I don't think so. I think we really wanted to take this as far as it'll go. So we want to see, like, we'll take it to anyone who will listen. Anyone who wants to come up and have a dance, we're willing to play to them. Sydney's convenient because it's local. We've done a little bit, like we did a show in Melbourne. We've sort of been down to Wollongong, up to Newcastle, and sort of as far as we can go that's convenient. But no, definitely want to, like, not particularly staying in Sydney, just that's where we've found our stick at the moment.
Yep, fair enough. Let's talk about the album again. The other thing that I noticed about it is that it is beautifully recorded. There's a great balance between the instrumentation there. Now, I'm a musician as well. Now, I know you can paper over some things with a good mix and therefore a good master, but not everything. But you guys, my point here is that you guys have recorded this beautifully. So you worked across different studios, I understand. Is that correct? And
Yep.
What was the reason behind working across different studios rather than just trying to get all of the songs recorded in one block, so to speak?
It was, it was a consideration of, like, what instruments worked best in what rooms. So we did a lot of the drum parts at A Sharp Studios in Sydney because it's got a great drum room and it's got some great outboard gear that our producer, Nathan Sheehy, was interested in. So he sort of took the reins on that and said, I love your sound. This is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to get this sound. So it was a consideration on his part of the best place to take us for the instruments and the rooms and the gear.
Okay. Tell me about Nathan. He's a name that I haven't come across before.
So I think he's been kicking around for a while. I know he's been engineering on a few, like, relatively big projects. I think he did some stuff for Birds Tokyo and a few other bands. We sort of got onto him from a local Sydney band called Creo, who we really liked their sound and were interested in that sort of sound and tracked down Nathan through that. And we just got onto him, and he was just a bloke. So we just got along like a house on fire, and the whole thing just kind of became a collective project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Was it one of those albums that was recorded over a couple of months or a couple of years? You know, the old, your first album. I assume this is your first album, so that should be a question. Is it your first album?
It is our first album.
Yeah, so was it one of those albums that was effectively put together over a couple of years and you found time where you could find time to do things?
No, it was like a solid 6 months of on and off booking in where we can. So we weren't like every day, but over a 6-month period, we were recording the album.
Okay, rightio. The old juggling day jobs with band thing. How does that go for you guys? Because it's always been a bane of every musician's existence, really, isn't it?
Still is, yeah, absolutely. But you do it because you love it, right? So, like, we found the time and we made the time because we were passionate about this thing. So we basically have our jobs to pay for our love of music.
Yeah, and look, because I'm going to be releasing this as a podcast episode, anybody listening that's not a musician, that's the reason musicians work. Yes, there's rent considerations and, family is a completely different thing. So if people have got kids like what I've got, well, that's another story. But when it comes down to if you don't have kids and you can focus on a band, you generally are working to support your creative outlet, aren't you?
Absolutely. Like, what else are you going to do?
Well, it's a noble pursuit. The world needs music. I often say, and I've said this many times on the podcast series, but if it wasn't for the musicians, the poets, the vagrants, the magicians, if it wasn't for them, the artists as well, of course, the world would cease to turn, because we're the ones that are we're creating stuff out of literally nothing. When it comes down to military exercises, politicians, it's all stuff that's already there. They're just articulating it and saying, do this because X, Y, or Z. But all of those people that fall under the banners that I just mentioned, it's creativity, really, isn't it? That's the stuff that inspires and makes people, well, it gives people a little bit more than just a reason to live, I think.
Absolutely, mate. You're preaching to the choir here. We're all about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, indeed. So, talking about poets, lyrical themes, the words, are they meaningful for the band, do you think? Or, you know, the Faith No More thing where Mike Patton used to just put whatever rhymed and just fit within the musical stanza, as I think he's already professed to many times. But for you guys, is there a bit more meaning there?
Oh, no, definitely. So it's more of like real-life experiences, I think. They all have come from somewhere, whether or not it's like an experience that we've been through or like a perception. So one side of an experience and things like that. So sort of covers everything from life that we've been living over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the art. You mentioned the artists. So the artwork there. I know a lot of people probably won't pay attention to it because that's just the way people are these days, but it is great artwork, I must say. So tell me about that. Oh,
yeah. So we are so lucky. We've got a whole bunch of friends that we've been able to bring into this thing. One of our friends, Christy Torrington, she drew those portraits for us and then did the logo up and all that sort of stuff. And all of the, if you see it, it's like all of the water droplets and stuff like that are actually stuff that she did while making that. We basically gave her some pictures and then she just took it from there, and it honestly blew us away when she delivered those things.
Yeah, okay. Now, was there a specific, I'm looking at the artwork right now, is there a specific order to things? Like, is it, are you arranged in a way on purpose, or is it just the artist's interpretation of the band?
No, so she drew the portraits and then we arranged them. So when we were putting them together, it was more of a consideration of, how weird is that? Like, so-and-so is looking at so-and-so.
Yes.
So like, that was mostly the consideration. And then Tony down the bottom, the drummer, he just looked so deep in thought. He had to be down there. He was off in his own little world.
Yes, I'm noticing that now. So the young lady in the band there is staring intently at, looks like the band logo there. So which one are you, mate? Yep. Just to put a face to the name.
I'm bottom left.
Gotcha. There you go. So you're looking at the logo as well.
I am.
There you go.
I love that logo.
Look at that. What about merch? Have you guys thought about merch? Have you got merch to offer at gigs and also online?
No, we're about to do merch. So we looked at some stuff on merch, just to see what was available out on the internet. And there's some stuff where you can, no cash up front and get some shirts made, and it's like made to order, but that didn't really work out. So I think what we're going to do is get some of the merch made. We've got some vinyl that are coming for this record if they finally get delivered. So we've got some of those for sale. And then just kind of want to get bits and pieces. We're going to get some patches and guitar picks and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
We can start to give away.
What about you with your... Because you're the guitarist, right? I take it in the band?
I'm the bass player.
Bass player there. Well, bass player to bass player. That's what I am as well. So that's interesting, actually. So when you started playing the bass, and because I've already mentioned the Rolling Stones... Well, what I feel is a Rolling Stones connection via the sound of the band. Was it guys like Bill Wyman that you were inspired by, or was it the fairly typical 90s, 2000 thing where you were into grunge or new metal or what have you?
No, I actually got into funk. I had a bass teacher that was a bass player and a saxophone player in a Pink Floyd cover band, and he just opened my mind. he got me into Jackson 5, and then like even into rock and roll, where he got me into Paul McCartney and like going through James Jamerson. So that's sort of where I found my like love of bass when I got into it. I found somebody that was just opened my mind to it.
I've got a big block-mounted poster of Larry Graham staring at me, just above my desk here. Yeah, it's I think a lot of people don't understand bass playing who aren't bass players. Of course, they just think the bass is there to fill out the sound or provide the bottom end, but it's essential. It's an essential component to the groove, and it's not done better than in funk and disco music. Jazz, of course, does it very well as well. But I've played in all sorts of bands, and I tend to interview bands that would fall under the banner of heavy metal usually. But in almost every instance, including this conversation I'm having now, when I've spoken to a bass player, we've all professed to being fans of funk, disco, Motown. It's just the bass player's creed, isn't it?
It's just the rhythm. Like, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, you listen to a lot of rock music, and with the greatest of respect to some pretty good bands out there, there's no groove, and there's nothing for a bass player to wrap their ear around. And
definitely,
yeah, it's very, it's. Look, I'll ask you a question about the music that you've created here. So, was the music brought to you, and it was a case of, mate, just go ahead and do what you think is right, or were you given a specific set of instructions on what to do with your bass playing to accompany what was written?
No, it's like, go for it. So basically, as we've spoken about in the band before, like, Ben or Tyler will bring a song, and what they love about it is that they can give it to us, and we do things on it that they wouldn't have even thought about. So there's that freedom there, like, between us to sort of be like, hey, I've got this thing, do what you do on it.
Yeah, that happens very rarely in my experience.
Absolutely.
I've been in session environments where it's like, it starts out with, do whatever you think you want to do, you do it, and you end up putting far more notes on there. And I know James Lomenzo, who was in White Line and Megadeth, talked about the same thing. He goes, when I was playing a lot of notes, I didn't get many phone calls. As soon as I stopped playing a lot of notes and just sticking to the root note, my phone couldn't stop ringing. It was incredible. It's like there's an attitude from guitarists and songwriters out there that when they bring the bass player on there, the bass is to be seen and not heard or something.
Yeah. I think as long as everybody thinks that, like, you're working towards serving the song, you don't run into problems. So I think there's always a place to play less, but then sometimes you find your groove and, you know, play a little bit more, indulge a little bit.
Well,
I think it's trying to strike a balance, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also about whether or not your drummer can handle a groove as well. I've always found that some drummers are used to playing lock stock with a guitarist, and that's usually bad news for us bass players because they're focusing not on the groove but on being busy, which doesn't leave any room for groove. And I've tried to explain that to a lot of drummers over the years, but you know how it is, mate. People tend to want to they do whatever they want to do. You know,
but
and
Tony, our drummer, Tony, is all about the funk as well. So me and him, we got a thing going where we try and just work on being like locking in together.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how do you guys have practice sessions, just you and him, where you get in there and you say focus on a riff for a little bit and you start mixing things up? Have you done anything like that in the past?
Yeah, we've been experimenting with that sort of stuff a little bit. I think making this record made us realize how much we need to work together more, because it was sort of like we were just rehearsing as a band. It came to doing this record, and we learned a lot from actually the recording process and being like, hey, wait a minute. If him and I start working together more, we can lock in a bit better this rhythm section rather than just being a bass and a drum together, you know?
And what's your instrument of choice? What brand do you play?
Fender, actually. So I got a P bass, and then for the recording I was using between a P and a jazz bass.
Yeah, the music really lends itself to that big fat P bass sound, and of course the jazz bass.
It does.
There with it's a bit
nice flat wounds on it. Yeah.
Oh god, yeah. Well. What are you using? Rotor sound, or what sort of strings are you using?
I was just using the Fender flat wounds on the P bass, and then I just had the round wound on the jazz bass.
Cool. Cool. And you got a Galleon Kruger or an Ampeg setup alongside of that?
Yeah, so that's what we're using for the recording. We're using the Ampeg, but I just run a Fender TV12 combo bass amp. Just real nice single tube, just gets a real nice warm tone, still got a little bit of mid punch to it. And like the other factor to consider is that it's easy to lug around for gigs and stuff like that. It's actually really convenient.
I think I know the one. It's got the tube preamp, but it's solid state. It's a solid state amplifier with a tube preamp. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's it, yeah.
Fender, in my experience with amps, particularly post about, 1990 or thereabouts, but they're a bit hit and miss, but that one's a good one that you've got there.
Yeah.
And it's loud enough to justify... Yeah, it's loud enough to justify bringing something, with all due respect, small along with you.
Yep.
I've got a big Galleon. Well, I've got a number of cabinets, but my go-to is a Galleon Kruger setup. I've got a 1001 RB, but I've also got the Micro Bass 500.
Yeah,
and
that's nice.
Well, it's all I really need. But because I play Music Man basses, so I'm playing a lot of funk and dub style bass lines. I'm playing covers, but I do my own thing. You know how it is. You've got to do your own thing and be creative.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I found that I really needed a heavy-duty speaker cabinet, so I ended up having to get the 800-watt Galleon Kruger, what's it called, RBH, 800 RBH, I think it is. I could be wrong. I'm probably completely wrong with that, but it's an absolute bastard on the back. Weighs about 50 kilos, 55 kilos or so. It's too heavy, to be honest with you, but then I find that if I don't use it, I'd go through speakers. I tend to kill speaker cones far too quickly.
Right. Interesting. So it's got too much power coming out of the head.
Yeah, well, and also too playing a lot of slap stuff. Trying to cut through. Oftentimes, I don't play through a PA. It's just me. We find that gives us the best balance in the bands that I play in, because when you put the bass amp through a PA, you've generally got to turn it right down. And let the PA do all the work, but that means that my on-stage volume isn't that loud, and I don't like using monitors. So people say, just use monitors, but it's like, I prefer it to come from behind me, not in front.
Yeah.
So you understand these things. You're a bassist, so a lot of people don't understand that there's actually a dynamic that is at play when you're on stage.
So you run Music Mans, do you?
Yeah, I've got 4 of them, and I've got I've got 2 Sterlings and 2 Stingrays, and both 2 5s and 2 4s. So I'm pretty covered, and I've been using that setup for at least 10 years now, so about 20 years actually.
I've always had my eye on those. Curious about them.
It depends. I find that they're very reliable, like that they will consistently produce the same tone and same sound. They've got their issues, like they've got a few, I wouldn't say, Music Man basses generally have a fatal flaw, and you just want it to appear sooner rather than later. So all of the battery cases on mine, they snapped, or something happened to the battery cases, which is a known issue with Music Man. The other thing was a truss rod in my Sterling, the one that I've had for about 22 years or so, that snapped. And that snapped before a gig, which wasn't helpful. But I think if you get a good luthier and you sort out whatever issues they've got, they are basses that you'll have for life. It goes without saying that that's how it is. I know that people have had issues with P basses and jazz basses. It really honestly depends on who's bloody made the thing too, whether or not they're in a good mood or not. So
each one can be different.
Yeah, I've played some piece of shit Squire basses that have played like a dream, and then someone's handed me a bass from the 70s and said, mate, this is the real deal. Play this like a P bass. It's got the cigarette burns on it to prove its age and all the rest of it. And they're like, man, you will never play another bass like this. And I'm like, this is garbage. This is...
Yeah, that's what I'm running now. So I am just got a Squire Jaguar bass, and I pulled out the pickups in it, put some new Seymour Duncan pickups in it, and it's great. It's the best. I'm just swapping between the P bass and that one live now.
Yeah, it's really it's random. And as the great Gary Albrecht up here, who used to be the fellow who checked all of Takamini's guitars when they came into Australia, I think I understand that's what he used to do anyway. He explained to me there's a process that you will never get, well, maybe not never, but it's very hard to get a decent guitar off a retail shelf because there's 2 or 3 sets of hands that a bass or a guitar goes through before it hits the floor, and the good ones are usually taken by that time. So I'm talking about the magnificent ones that are just set and will just age beautifully. But I think beyond that, as I say, you just want the issues to come to light sooner rather than later through constant playing, and then you fix them, and then I think you've got a decent bass or a guitar after that. But you got to wear down the frets for your playing style, and the neck has to be. I like a very low action, and a lot of bassists don't like a low action because of the buzzing.
No, with you on that too.
Yeah, well, I just find if you're busy and you like being dexterous and doing different things, and I never use a pick, you see, and I'm not judgmental either on that, but I'm much far more dexterous with my fingers. I just prefer having a low action because I don't want to press down too hard all the time because you wear out after. If I'm playing 5 hours over a 5 hour period each night, you get worn out. Yeah. Oh yeah, it does. Yeah. Less energy to pick up a beer later.
Yeah, that's it.
Mate, it's been a wonderful chat. I better let you go. You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series and syndicating for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and that conversation featured Sam Matthews, the bassist and Sydney-based The Knowgoods. Thank you so much for listening.